evening. We've still got some people coming in, but I'm going to go ahead and get started because we're going to have you out of here hopefully by 6:30, maybe a little after. We've got a lot of questions. Welcome to the town hall meeting. I'd like to start, if we can all stand and pledge allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'm just going to take a few minutes just to review some of the things that are going on in Washington, and then we'll open up for questions. The format today, if they haven't told you at the front desk, is so that everybody gets an equal chance. There are cards outside. If you have a question, put your name and the question on a card. I'll draw them out of the bucket. We'll go through them. If your question's already been asked and answered, you can ask a different question. So I'll call you by name. If you want to ask the question, I can read the question whichever way you want, and that way everybody gets a chance. There are a lot of serious things going on right now. I mean, if you listen to the radio today, you know, we've got 19 embassies around the world shut down because of the terrorist threat. We still have, when we left Washington, we're going to come back in September. We have to deal with a deficit that's projected to be about $650 billion this year. Interestingly enough, there are people in Washington who say, oh, you know, it's time to go ahead and loosen spending because the deficit's come down so much. I got to tell you, if anybody has an idea how big $650 billion is, if you take $100 bills and stack them, it's a stack 700 miles high. Okay? So the people in Washington who say, oh, you know, it was 1.3 trillion a few years ago, and now we have it down to $650 billion. This is no time to stop. Now is the time when we have to continue reducing the spending, and we have to bring, as I'll show some of the slides, we have to bring some of the mandatory spending to the table. Because in the end, that's what gets us in trouble. We have a couple of screens here. Let me just show you a couple of things. Our total spending last year in the federal government was about $3.5 trillion. That's okay. What you can see on the right is you see defense spending, including the war spending, is this year it's actually down to about, we're at 500 plus under about $600 billion for fiscal year 2013. Non-defense discretionary is about the same amount. Social Security over $750 billion. Medicare is now about $500 billion. Medicaid $250 billion. Interest on the debt still now about 220. So now it's about $240 billion this year, and other mandatory spending, including all the other things that the government spends on that it's required to contractually, things like pensions, retiree health care, food stamps, things like that. When you put it all together, it's $3.5 trillion, and only about 1.3 of that is what we call discretionary spending. The rest, well over $2 trillion, is this mandatory spending. And we go forward a few slides, and we'll go forward a few slides here. I'm going to just show you the rise in that. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Here. The rise in spending, if you look at where that spending goes, again, oh, it's on. Get rid of that autopilot. It wasn't good for those pilots in San Francisco, let me tell you. The federal health care spending, if you look at and this is the next 40 years of the main drivers of the federal debt. If you look at Social Security in the green, Social Security stays about constant as a percent of GDP because we do pay into it, and our payroll taxes pay most of the cost going forward. So even in 2035, when we deplete our trust fund, you wouldn't have to reduce payments so much. Discretionary spending, you see, is projected to stay steady, but federal health care spending, when you add Medicare, Medicaid, and veterans' health care benefits, federal employees' health care, retirement benefits, and Obamacare, What you have now is you have a rough, go from 5% of GDP right now to 12%, a 240% increase in health care. And this is not a percent of the entire budget. This is a percent of the economy. Okay? So what you've got to see is we've got to get federal health care spending under control. And what we'll talk about today, we'll probably talk about the President's Affordable Care Act. The first thing we have to do is stop expanding health care entitlements. And right now, we are set on January 1st for a huge expansion, the President's Affordable Care Act, which is a huge expansion of a new entitlement. So I think we've got to put the brakes on that. And that's going to be it. That's going to be it for this slide. I want to get to your questions, because I'm here to hear what's on your mind. We've got tremendous problems in Washington. Look, I can't blame you for looking at what Congress is doing, what the President's doing, throwing up your hands and just saying, look, none of this is working. I mean, why can't they get along? We got problems, and look, it's dysfunctional. There's no question about it. Washington is dysfunctional. I got to tell you, I now sit on the Appropriations Committee. There are a group of people in Washington who just can't stop spending. They cannot stop spending. I'll put my physician hat on. It's got to be some kind of addiction going on there, because they just can't control themselves. And the problem is that the fiscal situation we're in is dire. And again, as I told you last year, during the elections year, we're all worried about the economy. But God forbid that foreign policy begins to collapse. And I will tell you, I don't remember a time in my life when 19 U.S. embassies were closed overseas. I'm going to disagree with the President. We don't have Al-Qaeda on the run. This week, they have us on the run. That is not the way it ought to be. And that is very worrisome, something we got to pay attention to. So anyway, here's the bucket. Okay. So gosh, there's a lot of questions. That's good. All right. Mary Frances Tracy. You want me to read your question, or you want? Okay. Well, Congress raised the debt ceiling, and why? Right now, our federal debt stands a little over $16 trillion. We have, the debt ceiling is scheduled. In fact, we probably have, it's funny, because the way they do business in Washington, you can't even tell when we hit the debt ceiling, because they have all these gimmicks they use. The Treasury Secretary, my favorite one is federal employees who work and put money toward their 401k equivalent. The government takes the money every month from your paycheck, and then it's supposed to actually transfer it into an account. And when we start bumping against the debt ceiling, the Treasury Secretary just decides he's not going to do that. Right. He's just going to spend the money and kind of make it up later at some point, put that money in the account. And these gimmicks go on for months. Our best estimate is that we will hit the debt ceiling in probably the middle of November. Go out, hit the debt ceiling, and the Treasury Secretary will run out of gimmicks in the middle of November. At that time, we have an important decision to make. What do? My position has always been, if we're going to raise the debt ceiling, if we're going to do that to future generations of Americans, we better begin to get our fiscal house in order. So what kind of things have we done in the past? In the past, we've insisted, for instance, that every dollar of debt ceiling increase gets a dollar of spending reduction. And if you do the math, over a 10-year period, you eliminate the federal deficit that way. The other thing I think we should do this time is we should look at that kind of health care spending and look at the Affordable Care Act and say, if we're going to raise the debt ceiling, we ought to delay, or I would even consider eliminating the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare. Yes. Okay, so then in return for saying, okay, we're going to have to raise the debt ceiling a little bit, we're going to get rid of a huge future entitlement that otherwise will cause us to have to go back and raise the debt ceiling every year, every 6 months. So that kind of negotiation is going to go on in November. It's going to be messy, because the President is going to threaten to not pay troops. He's going to claim that he doesn't have the ability to send paychecks to troops. We know he does, but it doesn't make a difference. He's going to pick up a microphone. That's what he's going to claim. So stay tuned. We are not going to raise the debt ceiling without getting a substantial concession from the President. That's all I can say. The last time we raised the debt ceiling significantly with the Budget Control Act, we got sequestration out of it. Sequestration is sloppy. It's not the way anybody in your own household would ever cut your expenses. If you were going to cut your expenses, you wouldn't say, well, we're just going to spend 10% less on everything, because you kind of have to pay the mortgage. You may not have to go out to dinner once. So it's sloppy because it's just an across-the-board cut. But if the president doesn't want to get serious with specific targeted areas of cutting, then that's what we're going to have to live with. And I support the continuation of the sequestration. I support continuing spending at that lower level and not going back on that. And that was the concession we got. So we need to get concessions, major concessions that set us on a fiscal path if we're going to raise debt soon. That discussion is going to come about. We will come back, I'm told we'll come back in September, and within a week we will probably consider passing a short-term debt ceiling increase coupled with the Affordable Care Act delay. And that's what we're talking about right now.
Delay for everyone or just business?
Oh, no, delay across the board. Oh, no. No, none of this we pick and choose, like the president as well. Businesses get to not have to have the mandate, but regular individuals all are subject to the mandate. No, that's not, I don't even know where that came. Look, we were taken by surprise on that. That wasn't discussed with anyone in Congress. It was just, as you know, it was released on a blog Thursday during the July 4th weekend, okay? It's a very interesting way to do business, that's all I can say.
Do you mean delay or defunding for next year?
Delay is the same, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, total delay. Okay, Victoria Harvey. You want me to read your question?
Sure.
Okay, what are your thoughts on U.S. support of the Syrian rebels, ground troops, aid? Victoria, if you could tell me who the Syrian rebels are and who they're affiliated with, I can answer your question. In the absence of that, I am very worried about sending arms to a group where we don't know what they're going to do when they die. For instance, let's say that when Egypt had that issue, that we would have gone and supplied military aid in substantially increased amounts to Morsi. And it ended up being the Muslim Brotherhood. If you don't know what's going on there, caution is better. That's all I can say over there. So Syria is a mess. I will tell you right now, it looks like Assad is going to prevail. He has Russia behind him. The president's plans to reset relations with Russia just haven't worked. Okay? Russia is in with Assad. They obviously just gave asylum to Snowden without consulting with us. There's foreign policy problems, and that's one of them. All right, Carolyn Chinosky.
Right here.
Okay, you want me to read it?
Sure.
This is long. Okay, my mom is 94-year-old. God bless her. My mom's 90. She fell and broke her elbow and ribs and had a concussion. She needed surgery on her elbow, had PT in a rehab center, went for some outpatient PT, but after about 10 to 12 visits, they told her additional treatments may not be covered because there's a cap on therapy treatments. She was afraid she could afford these. She couldn't afford these treatments and didn't go for therapy anymore. She's not doing as well as she should be. Are you in favor of ending the Medicare cap on therapy? Carol, let's go beyond the Medicare cap on therapy. I'm against the government telling you what health care you need or should be paid. Because that's what they're doing. Your mother is depending on Medicare, and someone who has never met her doesn't have any idea what her particular circumstances are now saying there's a hard cap on her treatment. And I know, being a physician, you'll have two patients who are 94 years old, and one can be fairly active and not need perhaps need as much therapy. Another one might not be. And the trouble is that these systems treat everyone the same.
So then are you saying you are in favor of ending the cap on therapy?
I'm in favor of ending the ability of the government to tell you what therapy you need. In this case, the cap on therapy, there should be the ability of someone who actually knows your mother to make that decision for her individually. That doesn't exist in Medicare. How many of you are on Medicare? How many of you have called them with a problem?
I have.
How long were you on the phone?
I'm just, on the phone?
Yeah, how long were you on the phone with them?
Forever.
My mother, God bless her, one day I'm calling her, and she says, "Oh, Andy, I had a question about my Medicaid statement, so I called them." I said, "Mom, you must have way too much time on your hands." She said she waited 90 minutes before they attempted to answer her, but she didn't understand the answer they gave her. She waited 90 minutes. Right?
I had a procedure and the doctor did not was not covered with Medicare.
Yeah.
I tried to get through to them. And your office was the only one that was able to jiggle their chains.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that comment. It shouldn't have to be that way. But that's the problem when the government runs any healthcare. Look, I've worked in healthcare for 35 years now. I'm telling you, I see it all the time. You don't want the government running your health care in any way, shape, or form. Medicare is a good program, providing care for people over 65. But the trouble is, when they hit a budget problem, and they are constantly hitting budget problems, their answer is to ration care. You can call what they did to your mother anything else, but they rationed her care. They rationed her care. And they will get up and say, no, we don't ration care. No, we don't ration care. Of course they do. Because they do things like put caps on therapy without actually taking the individual patient into consideration. It's not the right way to do business. That's one of the reasons why I ran for office to say, look, we have got to get health care right. And the government doing health care is not the way to do it.
Thank you.
Okay, Lou Forno. Okay, I'll read a question. As a voter in the 1st District, I'd like to know why the House of Representatives are not voting on the immigration reform. In my job, I see a lot of people every day that need to have a path to citizenship. All right. God bless it, this is America. Everybody should have a chance to voice an opinion, and that's Lou's opinion. I will tell you, and again, everyone here, one probably knows, look, I'm son of immigrants. This country was welcoming to my parents who came here legally. Okay?
Right.
I will tell you, the reason why we're not taking up immigration reform is there are a lot of people in the House, myself included, who believe that a pathway to citizenship is not the way to deal with people who came here illegally. I'll put it that simple. That's not to say that we can just pretend that we have 11 or 12 million people here who are illegal and they're not going to stay here and they're not going to compete with us for work and things like that. That's not to say we're not going to deal with that. But the problem, the hang-up is that the Senate, the leaders in the Senate said, and the President, said without a pathway to citizenship, we're not even going to negotiate. I don't think that's right. There are many things you can do before you get to a pathway to citizenship discussion. For instance, you can say, look, if you're working in an industry, and believe me, representing the Eastern Shore, we have got a seafood industry that depends on temporary workers. Where literally, we used to have American workers, pick crab. This generation is not, people in this generation don't want to pick crab. So the Americans who want to pick crab are slowly leaving the industry. They are replaced by people who are here temporarily. Do we need temporary workers? Sure we need temporary workers. I'll tell you in the field of medicine. You look at that increase in healthcare need of this country, because remember, 10,000 people a day are entering Medicare. When I entered Medicare in 9 years, I am at the peak of the baby boom. 13,000 people a day will enter Medicare. We're going to need a tremendous number of healthcare workers. If we're not going to train them, we may well have to look overseas to get healthcare workers. So we will have a need. But I don't think it's right to say that we necessarily have to say you have to have a path to citizenship. Why do I say that? Because my parents came to this country for the economic opportunities, thank you very much, and the freedoms. If the country said to them, in return for us taking you in, you can't be a citizen. You can be a permanent resident, but you can't be a citizen. But your children can be, but you can't. They would gladly come here. Gladly come here. There are hundreds of millions of people in this world who would gladly come here and not even require citizenship. So to have a group of folks who are here illegally, insisting that we make them citizens eventually, I don't think is a reasonable starting point for discussion. And that's the starting point that the Senate started with. You have to have a pathway to citizenship. I just disagree. So this is going to take a little while. The House is not going to take up the Senate immigration bill. The House is probably going to take up a border security bill first. You know, they toyed with an idea of a DREAM Act bill, but we don't even have the support for that in the House, so that's not going to go anywhere for a while. I think it's the border security. And the bottom line is, I will tell you, there are plenty of immigration laws on the books. If we don't start enforcing the law, what good is passing any other law? See, the president shouldn't have to get to pick and choose which laws he wants to enforce, and that's what he's done with immigration law. So it's left kind of a bad taste with us, what the president has done on immigration. So the House is in no rush to take up immigration. If the president wants to start enforcing the law, if he wants to start stop insisting on pathways to citizenship, maybe we'll go forward. But I don't see us going forward anytime soon. And look, again, to the person who wrote the question, we believe that immigrants are necessary to this country. They've always been part of this country. And we welcome immigrants to come here legally and participate in our economy. We always have, for centuries. But coming here legally is important. We are, in the end, we are a nation of laws. And people have said, interestingly enough, one of the reasons that America is attractive to people from overseas is that we are, I won't say unique, but probably the best in the world at being a nation of laws. And people like that. They like being in a place where you actually have laws and you understand laws. And, so there's this, it's not on a whim, It's not that the government's going to make up the laws as it goes along, although it seems like that's what is going on now. So I'm not sure that actually saying we are actually going to step back, because amnesty is a step back from the rule of law. I'm not sure that makes us a better country. I think we can come to a middle ground of saying the people who are here, who've been here a while, established roots, have jobs that are important in our economy. All right, let's talk. But to start with a pathway to citizenship, I'm sorry. To me, that's a non-starter. I just, and the insistence of that is a signal to me that in the end, the president really doesn't want to solve this problem. The president wants to make a political point. And this problem needs much more than a political point to be made. So, all I can say is that's not going anywhere fast in November. Oh, D, I got your question here. Okay.
All right, Andy.
Yeah, I'm sorry. We're going in order of the questions. And
I thought you...
no, D. I got D.
I thought, okay.
D, I'm sorry. As member of Appropriations Committee, tell us about defunding Obamacare plans. It needs the funding. We're going to, when we come back, I sit on the Appropriations Committee, the Subcommittee on Health. The bill is actually drafted, our Appropriations Subcommittee bill that will not only defund this year's appropriation, it will not only, I shouldn't put that way, it will not only defund the discretionary part of the Obamacare spending, we actually are going to write in our appropriations bill to defund even the what the previous Congresses had done through what's called forward appropriations. It gets, basically, it's every last dollar we can find, we're going to try to take out of the budget. Now, the President's not going to agree. Harry Reid's not going to agree. So the issue is going to be, where do we take, the House will take that position, and then where do we go from there? I will say that in this fall's negotiations over next year's budget and the debt ceiling is where that's going to come up. That's our, and I think we have, I see the polls, by a 4-3 margin, Americans say we should do away with the Affordable Care Act. That's going to cause more harm than good.
Yes.
It's a 4-3 margin. I mean, it's a plurality of Americans who have, a majority of Americans who have an opinion feel that way. The majority of Americans don't like the debt ceiling, don't like the idea of having to raise the debt ceiling. I don't like the idea of having to raise the debt ceiling. But you know what? If I can trade a small debt ceiling increase for a repeal of the Affordable Care Act, I will take that any day of the week. Because in the future, again, that spending curve is what I'm thinking about. In the future, increasing health care entitlements, it will bankrupt the country. and that will add, that alone will add 10 million people to Medicaid. I mean, the Affordable Care Act has 10 million people in Medicaid, and probably another 5 to 10 million people on subsidized exchanges at the outset. That's a lot of people to add. So that's where I think the plans are going to be. All right. Boy, there are a lot of questions here.
Can you ask people to turn off their phones?
Oh, so people got their phones on? I'm sorry. Yeah, if you can turn off your phones, that'd be great. Betty Ruzek from Bel Air. Need to make a comment about missing my daughter's wedding because Maryland is a sanctuary state. Okay, I got to hear it. This one sounds interesting.
In 2006, my son and I drove to Philadelphia to catch a flight to the Dominican Republic to go to my daughter's wedding. Homeland Security would not accept my birth certificate from 1944 Newark Hospital in Pennsylvania. When I showed them my driver's license from Maryland, they handed it back to me and they said it's no good. I said, what do you mean it's no good? He said at the time, Maryland was one of 7 sanctuary states. Anybody could get a license in here because of the motor voter law. Your license is no good in Philadelphia. They wouldn't let me get on the plane. My son had to get on without me because he was giving my daughter away. I was left outside on a sidewalk, not knowing how I was getting back to Bel Air. Sat out there in my suitcase and cried and cried and cried. But this is the Democrats' fault. They made this a sanctuary state. They don't care how it affects anybody's life. And they took something away from me that I could never get back, my daughter's wedding.
Betty, look, I'm going to apologize to Maryland. I remember being in the state Senate when those issues were discussed, and we were very upset because that issue was brought onto the floor about when the discussion was to allow or to not. The way they do it is, as you know, the attestation is anyone applying for a driver's license in Maryland just attest. Oh yeah, by the way, I'm here legally. There's no check. There's nothing. So, and we made the argument that would negate the ability of someone to use a Maryland ID card. Didn't want to hear the argument, right? Senator Jacobs in the back didn't want to hear the argument. By the way, I should recognize Senator Jacobs and Delegate Glass. Where's Delegate Glass? He was here. There he is over there. Look, what can I say? It's bad policy.
Thank you for letting Denise Lovelady help me with my problem. God bless her.
I'll pass that along. I thank you. I believe I have great staff, and I want to thank you for that. Anyway, this is an anonymous one, but that's all right. I'll recognize the handwriting, so we won't get another question. With result of the sequester, a lot of civilian defense contractors are faced with furloughs. Bel Air region has a lot of APG employees who are facing these furloughs. What are you and your fellow GOP congressmen trying to do to overturn this? We passed a defense budget that actually restored almost all of the sequester cuts, and we're going. And the plan is to take the cuts and deeper cuts in things like the EPA, things like the Department of Education, Obamacare, cut that funding, and restore some of those cuts into defense. Because in the end, there are very few things that are enumerated in the Constitution that is the responsibility of the federal government. Defending the nation's one of them. And is there waste in the Defense Department? Sure there is. There's waste in any organization that large. But we have to remember the president cut $50 billion as part of his budget negotiations 2 years ago, and then sequester cut another $50 billion. That's a lot of money very quickly to cut. Can we ramp down spending or level spending for a while and allow these things to happen? Yeah, that's probably what we ought to do. But when you have, for instance, the Department of Energy, which had a 240% increase in their budget over the past 5 years, 240% increase, and you're telling the Defense Department they've got to cut 20%? I don't think that's right. So we're going to go into those other departments, the State Department, for instance. We passed the bill through the State Department because, look, my belief is before you send foreign aid, you better take care of everything here. Yeah. So we cut it 19%. You should have heard the complaints from some members of the Appropriations Committee. 19%, that's all. I mean, I thought we could have gone even more than that. But that's what we're doing. So we're reorganizing the budget on the House side to prioritize defense spending. Again, not restoring it to what it was at the high point, but to lessen the impact of the cuts. So hopefully we won't need the furloughs to go on. Dick Rozecki. The U.S. has 15 aircraft carrier groups. Actually, we only have 11 now. When I was activated during Desert Storm, we had 15. Now we only have 11. The Russians have one. The Chinese have one. Which is more important to you? The sad quality of U.S. one, where I live, or the U.S. Navy aircraft carrier groups? Well, Dick, I have to tell you. If we don't defend the country, they won't call it U.S. 1. They'll call it Russia 1. Literally. We have people in the world who want to destroy us. And I don't know, where's Dick? I'm sorry, raise your hands. Dick, we have people in the world who want to destroy us. Pure and simple.
15 to 1?
We have 11 now. We don't have 15, we have 11, and it's scheduled to go to 9.
And we're building
Yes,
the world's most expensive aircraft carrier on top of it?
You bet. Dick, let me tell you something. Our troops and our people deserve the best possible technology and the best possible defense.
Yeah.
Now, is there waste in the government? Sure, there's waste in the government somewhere. But but I honestly think 15, given the fact that we now have we have activity not only in the Middle East, the Mediterranean, the Atlantic, but the Pacific, 15 is probably the right number. 11 is probably too low. Dick, I disagree with you. I know, and God bless us, we're in America, we can disagree. I honestly think that our projections, remember, we have to defend the largest trading economy in the world, which is our economy. So we have other things to defend besides, we have terrorism, we have other, but we defend an economy that is under attack. I mean, again, the Iranians, the Russians, the Venezuelans, the Cubans, I mean, they all want to destroy us. China, I don't think, actually wants to destroy us because we buy too many things, honestly. I mean, I think if you analyze what's going on, China, although don't get me wrong, the hacking and the things like this that they're doing to American companies on a case-by-case basis are bad for our companies. In the end, they don't want to destroy us the way the Russians want to destroy us, or the Iranians. The Iranians are a very, very serious threat. So I'm going to say that I would not support decreasing the carrier groups further. That's my opinion. All right, Dave, there you go.
I thought you
No, it's Dave Price. It's the other one. It's the other Dave. Your card's somewhere in there. Okay, discharge petition on Select Committee on Benghazi status. Did you sign it? I did not charge you to sign a discharge petition on the Benghazi status because I will tell you that that we are making headway with our regular committees, and right after that happened, the IRS popped up. Now, there are only so many select committees you're going to be able to get away with. I mean, that's just the way it is. I mean, organizing a select committee is a big step. It actually costs millions of dollars to organize a select committee. And I don't know what else is out there. The Benghazi deals, even a select committee is not going to solve. The only thing a select committee does is it basically combines, Congress now, I think there are 4 committees that are looking at Benghazi within their jurisdiction in the House. So it is a little diffuse. But that being said, the major problem is that it appears that we won't get the answers until we have access to the people who are on the ground at the, not at the consulate, but at the compound. So where that second fight was that day. Because I think it's fairly common knowledge to everyone now that that was the CIA office in Benghazi. And there were dozens of people on the ground in the CIA in Benghazi. And obviously, something is being kept from us. There's something they were doing that's being kept from us. It's going to take a while to get to the bottom of that. Because as you know, the revelation came out this week that they actually moved some of these individuals and actually changed their names. I got to tell you, you don't do that unless you're hiding something. And we're going to get to the bottom of it. That's all I can tell you. We're going to get to the bottom of it. It's going to take a while because we're dragging the administration kicking and screaming. What can I say? That's been the lay of the land for the 2.5 years I've been in Washington.
Are we allowed to ask questions?
Bill Detweiler.
Answer a
Yes, sir.
question?
Excuse me?
Are we allowed to ask a question when you answer a question?
I'm sorry, you mean a kind of a follow-up?
Yes.
Well, I'll ask you, do you want us to do it that way, or, because I've got a pile of questions to get through. I'll leave
I
it.
understand that, but it seems like...
Okay, I'll tell you, we'll get one follow-up question. How's that? One follow-up question. Go for it.
Well, with the committee with the Benghazi, you have 4 committees going every different way, and they're not subpoenaing these people.
They are organizing, and they will subpoena. Subpoena is also, is kind of a big step,
And now
but,
we have all these embassies closed,
yeah.
and they still don't know what the heck happened there.
Yeah, we're going to get all I can tell you is, and I know because I heard the speaker on this very subject 2 days ago. The speaker is the one who is organizing the committees. He's making sure that they don't go off in all different directions, that they are in fact coordinated. And when we need subpoenas, we will issue subpoenas. Subpoenas are a big deal. I'll tell you one of the problems with subpoenas right now is if a subpoena is not complied with, do you know who gets to enforce it?
Yeah.
Eric Holder. Okay? Well, so, you know, you're driving down that way. You're right. Believe me, we issue. I know, for instance, the Science Committee just issued a subpoena to the EPA last week. The committees are issuing subpoenas. Subpoena is kind of a big step. It will be taken when it's necessary. Just trust me, you have not seen the end of Benghazi. You have definitely not seen the end of the IRS investigation. There is no question you've not seen the end of that. And that is when that comes out, when the whole ramification of where the IRS is sharing your data comes out, there's going to be real problems. And the president's not going to be able to talk. He's not going to be able to say it's a phony scandal and, let's move on. It's going to be serious. Bill Detweiler.
Yes, sir.
Where are you?
Right here, sir.
Okay. Do you think it's fair or just that the people, like Congress, not passing the budget responsible for sequestration? Wait, do you think it's exempt from the furlough process? Do you think it's fair that we're exempt from the furloughs because we passed sequestration? Well, first of all, I didn't vote for sequestration. I think it's a bad
I
idea.
didn't mean you specifically.
Yeah, I voted against this because it's sloppy. It's a sloppy way to do business. No, we probably should have, but I will tell you that the House, for instance, has cut 15% from it. From the last day, the last budget before I took office to this year's budget, we had a 15% cut in our budget over the past 3 years. We do believe that you lead by example. And there aren't many federal departments that have had a 15% cut to their budgets. We are one, the House of Representatives. No, it probably should have been. And actually, we actually did have furlough. We actually had sequestration cuts, even to our budgets, even though they cut 15%. But most offices were able to deal with it without furloughs. So we were subject to sequestration, but we chose because we knew about it coming. Here's one of the problems. The problem was, and everybody understands what sequestration is. As part of the Budget Control Act 2 years ago, they couldn't come to a budget deal, so they said, okay, we're just going to cut $80 billion a year across the board from all the discretionary programs. So we leave Social Security, Medicaid, and obviously interest payments, those alone, and we're going to cut from the discretionary side of the budget. This was the law of the land. If anybody had talked to anybody in the House, we would have told them, no, we're not backing off from sequestration. You give us a deal or sequestration is going to go into place. They pretended like it was never going to happen. I mean, if you read the news stories, they're like, oh, it's so bad, no one will ever allow it to happen in Washington. No. The Republicans in the House are very serious about getting this budget under control.
Well,
And if the sloppy method of sequestration, is the way to do it, and it's the only way the president will allow us to, that's what we're going to do. But it's bad. It's a bad method. But we were subject to it. The House was subject to it.
Innocent people, if you will,
Yes.
are getting slammed by partisan politics.
Let me ask
Innocent
you a question.
people are going to be losing their mortgage,
How-
and going to be losing their house. They can't pay their bills because of what you guys did. 20% pay cut. That's a huge hit here.
Ma'am, hold on. You mean somebody got a 20% annual pay cut as part of the sequester? No. The Department of Defense is getting the latest we heard is it down to 8 days furlough in the year? 6 days. So for 6 weeks you get a 20% pay cut, which the last time I did the math amounts to a 2% pay cut? Now I got to tell you, let me tell you something. If every American is not willing to take a 2% decrease in whatever part of the budget that affects them, we will never, ever, ever, ever solve the problem we have. If we're not in this together, like I said, the House took a 15% cut over 3 years. 15%. And ma'am, I got to tell you, it's misleading to say that somebody got a 20% pay cut. That is misleading. We did not cut anyone's pay 20%. No one's paid 20%. Yeah, some people get a 6-day furlough out of, how many days a year do you work? 250? That's a 2% cut. You know what I got to tell you? I got to tell you, complain to the managers because maybe they should have taken less trips. Maybe they should have spent less on IRS conventions that cost $350,000 before they cut anybody, before they furlough anyone. That's partly a management issue, because ma'am, I manage a $1.5 million budget. I didn't furlough anybody. Because you know what I did? I cut back on paper clips and paper and all the things that you can do to preserve it. So, I gotta tell you, we are in it together. We all have to take, we're all gonna have to look at the federal government and say, look, there's some things the federal government provides us now that they're not gonna provide us at the same level. Because we have a $1 trillion deficit, and that, in the end, is what's going to threaten our economies. Our economy. That's the greatest threat to our economy, that $1 trillion debt. So we're going to deal with it. And is it elegant? This is a question. No, it's not elegant in any way, shape, or form. Not elegant. But it was the president's idea. And that's well documented. It came out of the White House as an idea so bad, such a bad idea, it would never get put into effect. Why would you why would you actually sign a bill that you thought was a bad idea? I don't know. I don't know. I don't deal with work that way. Okay, James Whitehurst, is that right? Okay, James, I feel as if I'm not being represented by the House or the Senate due to the hyperpartisan something of both major parties. I'm sure that's not a good word. It begins with S, but it's not that word. It's not that word. Less than 25 bills were passed during the entire session. Oh, no. Oh, my gosh. We pass 10, 12 bills every week.
Last week's USA Today, right before your little summer recess, said 22 legitimate bills were...
Oh, wait. And who decided what a legitimate bill was? You know? I tell you, sir, the only reason I know is because I preside over these sessions, and we pass 10 or 12 every week on what's called a consent calendar. What will you personally do? What will you personally do to help make Congress work for the people and not for the parties? I'm going to attempt to cut federal spending. That's the best thing I can do for the American people right now, is we can get our budget and our debt and our deficit in control. Because if we don't, the future is bleak. The future's bleak. We have got to, the Fed cannot continue printing trillions of dollars. Anymore. It's electrons. The biggest threat we have, the American people have, is the federal government spending not only your wealth and prosperity, but your children and grandchildren's wealth and prosperity. And they do it to gain votes. Do you think it's a popular stand for me to come here and say, yeah, we actually have to cut some people's pay? You think that's popular? Why do you think it got broken? Because so many people went to Washington, all they want to do is spend. They want to go and they want to spend. They want to make promises you can't keep. I'm going to talk about Medicare for a second. Because you know what? I'm not going to gain any popularity. They said Medicare's the third rail. Let me tell you the truth about Medicare. I've paid into Medicare all my working life, 35 years I paid into it. Everyone on Medicare is paid into it. What percent of your health care costs do you think that premium paid? over the years? What percent? Not zero. I mean, well, how many times what you have paid in do you think the average person will actually get out of it? The answer is 3 times as much money. The average couple earning the average income in the United States pays $111,000 in Medicare taxes, which is the premium over their lifetime, inflation adjusted, and will get $300,000 in care back over their lifetime. You're right, it can't be done. People in Washington made promises they knew you couldn't keep. Why? To get reelected. That's it. I'm sorry. If you want me to go to Washington and promise that we will never touch Medicare, I'm not going to do it. I've looked at the budgets. My mother's on Medicare. I understand. I'm going to be on Medicare in 9 years. It's going to be broke in 9 years. It's going to be broke. We have got to deal with very, very difficult issues. So what am I going to do to work for me? I'm going to talk about difficult issues. Now look, some people aren't going to like it. Some people aren't going to like the fact that we have to cut funding or that we have to talk about Medicare and how to keep it solvent so that not only this generation, my children's generation is going to have it. It can be done, but we got to stop making promises we can't keep. That's the bottom line. So what am I going to do? I'm never going to make a promise that I know we can't keep. And they do it together. Okay. Carol Lang. Oh, I love this one. What's being done to pass the fair tax? Do you support it? Well, Carol, actually it's interesting that comes up as the next question. Because if you saw the ads, I guess, not this campaign, but 2 campaigns ago, they accused me of wanting to pass a 28% sales tax or something. They didn't mention that that's called a fair tax, and it would remove every other tax you pay to the federal government. Right. Now, the average working person, the average pay in this country, pays, between them and their employer, pay over 14% for payroll tax for Social Security, 5% for Medicare, which gets them up to 19%. And then the lowest income tax bracket is 15?
Yep.
That's 34. I think it's a pretty good deal if actually instead of paying the 34, you eliminate all the other taxes and consider going to a fair tax. I think it's something we ought to discuss. You know why they don't want to discuss it in Washington? Because the premise of the fair tax is that you eliminate all the other federal taxes. And you have just one tax rate. It's called, and it basically becomes a sales tax. The trouble is, you can't play shell games anymore. When you need more money, you have to tell people we're going to raise the rate from this to this. It's not, actually we're going to play around with a few deductions here, we're going to allow inflation to adjust this and adjust that. It's very transparent. They don't like transparency in Washington. They like to hide it under the shell and keep the shell moving at all times. So I support a fair tax or a flat tax. I also believe in that. The other thing that the fair tax does is everybody has a stake in the game.
That's right.
Everybody. Right now, as you know, almost half the country doesn't pay an income tax. There is no federal sales tax. So half the country is getting the defense, is getting all the things that the government pays for. And I don't mean Social Security and Medicare, because again, those are paid for our payroll taxes. But all the other things you get. You have access to food stamps, you have access to defense, you have access to all the entitlement programs, you have access to the safety net, and you never pay into the federal government. I just don't. Look, I'm going to agree with Ben Carson on this. Those of you who heard Ben Carson say, look, everybody's got to pay a little bit. They got to own a little bit of this. Because if somebody's paying that tax, believe me, they will watch a little more carefully what's going on in Washington. So yeah, do I think we need tax reform? Yeah, we need to simplify things. I think the simplest method is a fair tax, but flat tax is pretty good. It's a pretty good second. So hopefully we'll go to flattening some of these things. Okay, Richard, Rose.
It's me again. I got the
How
choice.
did they give you 2 cards?
You can pass on one of them.
I like this one. This is good, actually. It's about you're trying to buy gasoline here in Hartford County. You'll find a little price competition. If you try to buy handlers, find no price competition. What's your competition in the U.S.? I'm going to bend that, since that was your second question, into talking about the price of gasoline. Okay? Is anybody here happy that gasoline is $3.59 a gallon at the lowest price station? Why are we accepting that? We have, well, I won't even talk about the gas tax increase, but we are sitting on the edge of the greatest energy find. Our ability to extract natural gas is probably the greatest energy. This actually surpasses the discovery of oil in Pennsylvania 100 years ago. This is tremendous, this discovery. I had a guy come up to the house to work on something yesterday, and he brought me out to his truck and back, and he goes, hey, my truck runs on natural gas. So we go over to his pickup, sure enough, there's a big natural gas cylinder in the back. And I'm going, well, how much did you pay for it? How much did you pay for your fuel? And the way they price natural gas if you're going to buy it is in a gallon equivalency. So it's the same number of BTUs as a gallon of gas. Pay $2.44 a gallon. Okay? And I will tell you, there are only two. He was bemoaning the fact there are only two outlets in Baltimore, so there's no competition. So if there were competition, probably even less. I was out in Oklahoma about 9 months ago. One of the guys has two of these things in the back of his SUV, two of these big tanks. He was paying $1 a gallon equivalent on natural gas. Now, ladies and gentlemen, BTU is a BTU is a BTU, okay? If we really invested and produced that natural gas, we could bring the price of gasoline down. The President has been an obstacle, and the Senate has been an obstacle. What can I say? The Keystone Pipeline is the poster child for what's wrong with our energy policy.
Yep.
The Canadians, our friends, they are dying to sell us 1 million barrels of oil a day. And the President says no. So what are they forced to do? I know. So, and I won't even get into the energy bills, because all of you ought to realize that with this natural gas coming down, the price of natural gas having come down in the past few years, and the use of more natural gas to generate electricity, you have to ask yourself why your energy bill isn't going down in the state. It should be going down, not going up. It goes up because we're squandering our energy dollars through the government on building offshore windmills. I've got to tell you, we are in global competition in this economy. One thing that can gain us back, our global, or help us retain our global leadership, is cheap energy. Cheap energy. And cheap energy and a good economy will lead to us having the ability to spend money on environmental protection. But you can't put it first. If you put it first, it strangles the economy, and then you have less money for environmental protection. Anybody who doesn't believe that, go to China. Everybody writes Chinese, not China. Look, their economy per capita is minuscule compared to ours. They just have a whole lot more people. That's why their economy is almost our size. But they don't spend money on environmental protection. You can't breathe in Beijing because their economy, they don't have enough money to feed their people, much less to spend money on environmental protection. So we've got the cart before the horse. First, let's develop the energy policy. Let's get our economy booming. And I don't mean part-time jobs, ladies and gentlemen. You ought to look up the statistic. I didn't know about this about 4 months ago. Because when you hear the weekly labor report that we create 162,000 new jobs last month, over the last 5 years, and this is true of this year also, do you know what percent have been part-time jobs of all those new jobs? Because they count toward the unemployment rate. 6 out of 7 jobs were part-time. 6 out of 7 jobs created in the last 5 years, and this year is no exception, are part-time jobs. Now, ladies and gentlemen, that is no way to run an economy. But this is not, we have always, I don't know about you, but I've always felt that when you graduate from college, especially you graduate from college, young people, they should be going out getting employment. They're getting off of part-time jobs. Why? Well, I'll tell you one of the reasons is the Affordable Care Act. It'll go right back to it. We're penalizing employers for hiring someone full-time. What kind of crazy economy are you running where you actually penalize an employer to hire someone full-time and encourage them to hire someone part-time? It's not good for the business, not good for the economy. Ask any employer. Would they rather have one 40-hour-a-week employee or two 20-hour-a-week employees? They have to train 2 employees. The employees never get really good at the job. They only work 20 hours a week. It's a crazy idea. It's exactly what's going on. So I challenge you, next time the unemployment statistic comes out, and I'll tell you, you got to dig for it. Dig for the information on how many of those jobs are part-time jobs were created. It's shocking. The president gets up and says he created 2 million jobs. 6 out of 7 of those jobs are part-time jobs. That is not a recovery. And part of the reason is that we are spending money where we don't need to spend money, so our debt and deficit's too high. The other one is we're looking, this energy revolution, we're ignoring it, and we really shouldn't do it. Let me get back. See, I'm sorry I digressed on that, but I did want to talk about energy because there is no reason we're spending $3.50 a gallon for that number of BTUs to run our car. Because if it were natural gas, it would be half that much if we would do natural gas. Okay, Steve Karopis. Steve was. President Obama swore to uphold the Constitution. Enforcement of the law is part of the Constitution. He's not enforcing laws, namely immigration, fast and furious. Should he be impeached? Impeachment didn't go too well for us the last time we tried it. This is a real but in all honesty,
Nobody's bringing it up.
we have to talk about the constitutional crisis that is impending. When a president goes around and gives a speech, and I urge all of you to listen to the president's recent speeches, where he comes right out and says, "This Congress," I'll paraphrase it, "this Congress is not doing what I want. I'm just going to go around." There is no going around against the Article 1 body of the legislature. The Constitution starts with Article 1, the legislature, because folks like me are elected every 2 years. We're responsive to the people. Because if we're not, we get turned out. We make the laws. This is a simple construct. The president's supposed to be a constitutional lawyer. I'm going to get critical of him here, because he's a constitutional lawyer. This isn't complicated. The legislature passes the laws. The executive branch enforces the laws as the legislator passed them, and the courts get to decide that those two other branches are doing things properly. Now, as a sign of the fact that something's gone awry, is every major case where the executive's overreach has been challenged has been turned back by the courts. That overreach has been turned back. And whether it's these recess appointments to the National Labor Relations Board, which was astounding to me. You know, I guess I have the privilege of being the closest Republican to Washington. So a lot of times they ask me to come in when we do the pro forma sessions. I'll go through a little history. You know, the problem was the president was starting to make some recess appointments while we were gone for a week. So a group of the freshmen 2 years ago got together and said, listen, went to the speaker and said, Mr. Speaker, we will volunteer to come in and hold, because every 3 days you have to be there. So you have to be there Monday and Thursday or Tuesday and Friday when we're not there. And we will come in, one of the freshman class will come in and volunteer, and we will keep the legislature going. And my 6, 7, 8 times, I was that person because I was the closest one. So they asked me to come down and then preside over a pro forma session. Now, in those pro forma sessions, I'm actually the speaker of the day. I actually get the speaker writes a letter, read before the House. He appoints Andy Harris the Speaker Pro Tem. I have signed a $40 billion continuing resolution once as the Speaker Pro Tem. I signed the FAA extension once. When they were considering, both of them went to the White House, were signed by the President. Now, how does the President turn around and say, you weren't really in session? We were in session. We passed the bills, and they're actually signed by the Speaker Pro Tem that day, sent to the White House. So the Supreme Court, and what didn't even go to the Supreme Court, went to the appeals court, as you know. It was an overwhelming decision that the President overstepped his bounds on this. But what's serious is the President making the case to the American people, which I hope they don't buy, that when you're disappointed, when the President is disappointed with how Congress acts, they just take matters into their own hands. That's not the way the system was designed. It started last fall. It started before then. But what really piqued my attention was, if you recall, in October, the President said he wasn't going to enforce immigration laws on people who had come here as under the age of 18. He just wasn't going to enforce it. The immigration law was clear. You can't pick and choose. He not only didn't enforce it, he gave work permits. Now, why should Americans be concerned about that?
I got it, James.
Because issuing a work permit, issuing a work permit, that's right. It directly competes against American workers. It is a legislative decision who and how work permits are issued, taking into account its effect on the American workforce. The president doesn't get to do that on his own. Why did he do it? Oh, come on. Politics. I'm sorry. We gotta have a president who doesn't get up every morning thinking about politics. One follow-up question. Okay, in the back. Can we follow up related?
So, my question to you then, Andy, would be, what are you and your colleagues specifically going to do to clip the president's wings and stop him from usurping the power of the legislature and Congress of the United States?
That reminds me of the very first thing he did, which, look, I understand it's a controversial subject, is he decided he wasn't going to force the Defense of Marriage Act.
Right.
What did we have to do? We had to take him to court, okay? Now, we lost in court. We had a great lawyer. We lost in court. I sit in the Appropriations Committee, and Debbie Wasserman Schultz at least twice has gotten up and said, I can't believe we wasted millions of dollars taking an unconstitutional law to court. Well, Ms. Wasserman Schultz, it actually wasn't unconstitutional until you took it to court, and the court declared it unconstitutional. It actually was a legal act of Congress, which the president chose not to enforce. And here's a constitutional issue that's very, very important. It came up in California, on the California case. The California case, if it was decided that the person taking it to court didn't have standing, because what happened in California is they passed a constitutional amendment, marriage between a man and a woman. It was challenged. It was challenged in court, and the Attorney General in California chose not to defend a law passed by a constitutional amendment passed by the proposition passed by the citizens of California, a legally passed proposition by the citizens of California. And that's the job of the Attorney General. The job of the Attorney General is to defend legally passed laws, not to pick and choose. So the Attorney General decides not to do it. The governor says, I'm not appointing anybody else to do it. So a private citizen had to defend the law. And the court said that private citizen has no standing. Only the state can defend its own laws. So what you end up having is, and this is why that decision is a very, very serious decision. Not with regards to that specific case, although I disagree with their opinion on that, but on the overall construct of the judicial system in its place. What the court has said, that if an executive chooses not to defend a law in court, no one else has standing to defend that law in court. That's crazy. That is a complete collapse of the division of power. Right. So there is very serious issues coming forward. And again, I get it. I disagree with the Supreme Court on that. The Supreme Court should have thought long and hard about saying that if the executive branch chooses not to defend a legally passed law, and in California, proposition is a legally passed law, then no one has standing to defend against a plaintiff's attack on that law. That's very serious stuff. I mean, it is serious. I mean, I'm very worried about the breakdown of the division of power in the country. And we have to figure out what to do. Look, we're trying to work with it. The difference is, we in the House are trying to work within the confines of what the Constitution says. It says if you have a disagreement with the president, you take it to the court. That's the way it's supposed to work. That's the purpose of the court. So sometimes it doesn't work too well. Okay, we've talked about immigration here. Let's go through a few here. Why did I vote to re-elect Boehner as Speaker when he has a Speaker Boehner has a tough job.
No, you don't.
Yeah, he does.
No, you don't.
He's going up against the guy with the microphone.
No,
He's going up against the guy with the microphone. I'm always willing to give someone, before that vote, the Speaker came and told us, because I think he realized that there were people in the conference who were considering doing other things. And he came to the conference and said, look, we're going to, we're going to do business a little differently this Congress. We're going to get people together and decide how to proceed on things like when we passed the last continuing resolution, and we said that the Senate has to pass a budget. That was an idea that originated in the conference, forcing the Senate to actually pass a budget for the first time in 4 years. He's decided now to say that, look, he will not bring an immigration bill to the floor where a majority of the Republicans disagree with it. He won't do it. That's a good idea. So, when you elect someone to be speaker, there are two things you got to look at. One is, are they conservative? John Boehner is conservative. He's conservative.
No, he's not. He's a Democrat.
He's not. Oh my God. The other thing you do need, and I'm serious about this, you do need someone who knows the lay of the land there. And as much as we say, for instance, people criticize Mitch McConnell a lot.
Yeah, but he doesn't.
Mitch McConnell knows the lay of the land in the Senate. Now, do I disagree with him occasionally? Do I disagree with John Boehner on something? Absolutely. But let me tell you something. They understand, they don't make rookie mistakes procedurally. And I will tell you, you don't get anywhere unless you understand the procedures of that, especially in the Senate. And Mitch McConnell's a master in the Senate. I mean, I don't know how he's done as much. Look, we have not had a majority in the Senate for a while. He has a group of Republicans, I won't name names, but many of you know, who will strip off in a flash, 5, 6, 7 of them, enough to get you below that 40-vote threshold for cloture. And yet, he has a record number of bills that have been filibustered in this Congress, in that Senate. It's a record number. Now, look, it's not as much as we probably want 100% of them filibustered. But he's successful in the procedural thing. So was it a tough decision? Yeah, it's a tough decision. Because look, is he perfect? No. I'm not perfect. You're not perfect. No one's perfect. But I'm willing to give him a chance. This term, he has done what he said he was going to do. He has not brought anything to the floor where a majority of Republicans disagree with him. And I think that's actually the key test. Because a majority of the Republicans are now, I will say, real conservative. They are fiscal conservatives. They want business as usual to end in Washington. And as long as the Speaker is willing to comply with that, I'm willing to use his skill and ability. His skill and ability. Because you need both. You need both. So anyway, good question. Okay, where did all the ammo go to DHS for? Dave, this is the second question. How did you get 2 questions in?
Sure. They can tell us we only had 1 question.
All right. Late staff. Okay. Then you're not at fault. Okay. That's a real interesting question because we asked the secretary, because again, one of the nice things about sitting on appropriations is when I sat on the other committees, you had hearings, but the secretaries would send assistant deputy secretaries who occasionally didn't know about anything and weren't willing to answer about anything. Well, you're on appropriations, the secretaries come to your committee because they know if they don't come, they don't get funded. So secretaries come to the committee, and they're very responsive to our requests. So we made a request with Senator Colburn over to DHS to explain where the ammunition was going, what they were using, what they were doing with all this ammunition. And I'll just cut to the chase. Two important points. One is that they have a 2-year stockpile in the Department of Homeland Security. A 2-year stockpile. And I don't mean because they divide their use of ammunition into 2 things. One is training and the other is operations. Okay, now I was in the Navy, I understand training, you go to the range and you shoot some, and operations when you shoot an enemy, okay? Here's one of the interesting things. The Secret Service gets 2 million rounds a year, 1 million for training and 1 million for operations. I like to joke and say, if the Secret Service writes, it shoots one shot, it's a newspaper story. If they fire twice, it's a made-for-TV movie. 1 million rounds operational. So we're gonna get to the bottom of that, their definition of that. But the other problem is a two-year stockpile for training and operations. Now, this is not the Defense Department. This is the Department of Homeland Security. Okay, now, Coast Guard, all right, I understand. We're in a war. Coast Guard might need things. But the Social Security police force? I mean, you go down the list of some of these, and you go, why do they have a 2-year stockpile? And of course, they have the government contract, which is a preference contract, which, you know, if they say deliver, if the government says we need the ammunition, they have to deliver it. So the problem is we're now competing with the government, and we actually passed and I voted for a rider to our Homeland Security bill that actually, I think we allowed them half as much ammunition until they justify their stockpile. Some wording like that, where we actually made them buy less, with a particular view toward the stockpiling of ammunition. That, to me, that's again, look, if we, God forbid, the Department of Homeland Security really needed ammunition, it's very simple. This would be an emergency, and all the ammunition made in America would go to the Department of Homeland Security. This is not complicated. I mean, we do it every time we get into a fix. Stockpiling 2 years worth? No, I'm not buying that. Okay, Mark Fisher, Bel Air. If Hartford County Public Schools are receiving federal funding, why are they discriminating against the magnet school students in their busing policy? Mark, here's the problem. Here's the problem with the with education in the country is that it's top down. It's we somehow think Washington is going to solve education problems, like it solved all these other problems so well. So what's the really? I mean, think about it. Everything that Washington touches, with rare exception, it screws up. It screws up. So why do we think that somehow it's going to do better on education? I will hold the same thing I've been saying for years. Washington should get out of the primary and secondary education business, and we should reevaluate our student loan involvement. We should reevaluate it. Not that student loans aren't important, but you have to separate the politics from student loans. And look, I got 5 kids. They're students. They're all, 3 have been to college. 2 are going to go to college. You do have to ask, would any of you in this room lend your money at a 3.4% rate, knowing that the default rate right now is 20% on student loans, people who are in the payback period? Nobody would lend the money at 3.4%. Why is the federal government doing it?
Because it's not their money, it's our money.
You're darn right, that's why. And they want votes. Again, we have got, and I'll get to a follow-up on that. So we have got to reevaluate that, because I will tell you, when I went to school, I went to college, it didn't cost $30,000 tuition a year, okay? I am convinced one of the reasons why the cost of college has gone up so much is the federal government has made student loans relatively easy. We now surpassed $1 trillion in student loans. $1 trillion. I mean, and again, if the students were paying it back, I don't got a problem. But look at the default rate on student loans. And we're not doing anything about it. So one follow-up on that, sure.
You just took a position as a fiscal conservative.
Yes.
Does that mean that you would be in favor of reducing federal grants for construction, school construction to states, and let the states spend for themselves? I mean, all the magnet schools that were created in Hartford County were created by federal grant money. Would you be in favor of reducing all that and putting an end to that? You're a fiscal conservative, right?
Would I be in favor of reducing? I think the money should not go to Washington to come back to the local jurisdiction, yes. I think...
So that means the states would have to pony up the money themselves?
Yep, or the locality, yeah. Because you know what? You're going to have a more responsive school system if your state and your locality were responsible for it and didn't have to fill out a bunch of paperwork from the federal government. In fact, if you go to the state, I should go down there, knock on the door one day, and see how many people have jobs in the Maryland Department of Education. Sole jobs are writing federal grants. Last I looked, someone in the Department of Education writing a federal grant doesn't really help us. I mean, you want to help students, you get teachers in classrooms, you get discipline in classrooms, you do the things that need to be done. You get a curriculum that works locally. We won't even get to the core curriculum idea. A good idea, but let me tell you, a good idea locally, but when the federal government begins to impose a curriculum, you're going to have problems with it. So, I actually think that we should get out of the primary and secondary education business. We should decrease taxes, let that money stay in the states, and let the states decide how to run their school system.
Mr. Harris.
To do better. Yes. What is that a follow-up on that?
Well, yeah, because I asked the question. And you kind of
Oh, is it your question? I'm sorry. What did it?
Harford County,
Yes.
which receives federal funds regardless of how you feel about it,
Yeah.
is taking their best and brightest students that are in the magnet program, and they're going to bus them far away from their homes, drop them off at depots at 2:30 in the afternoon, where there's no way working parents can pick them up and provide them safe refuge homes.
Right.
And the county's not going to provide safe or secure place for them to be. They're discriminating against these students and taking their civil rights away, whereas they're going to bus everybody else within a mile walking distance of their home. You're going to have these students that are 6, 7, 10 miles from home that are left as chaff to the wind, and they're using some of their federal money not to do that with these students that are in the elite education, STEM programs, international baccalaureate, that isn't meeting federal standards of education, they're meeting international standards of education.
All right, we'll make, if you want, our office will call over to the department and find out about the flow of federal monies. I'm unaware.
I'll send you an email.
Send me an email and outline your best understanding of how federal dollars flow to it. If federal dollars flow to it, we can make an inquiry. If it's not federal dollars,
Federal dollars go to the county. County gives money to the Board of Education.
Okay.
Then the Board of Education gets to do what they want to. Well, they decided a few weeks ago that busing these students who have strived to get into high education programs are going to be deposited into their home high schools by their parents, then driven to a magnet center.
Sure.
And then dropped back there at the end of the school day. Well, high school ends at 2 o'clock. And he's going to get back to their home high school about 2:30.
Right.
Parents work. When are they going to get there? And in Harford County, if you're not at an after-school event, which they're making you pay for too, you have to get off school property by 3:30.
Right, it doesn't work. Okay, we'll make an inquiry about it. Oh my gosh, it's really 7 o'clock. All right, we're going to do one more question here. Okay, so, I'm sorry it took you so long. Okay, Mr. Egan Hatfield, am I pronouncing it right? Egan, okay. There are reports that military retirees currently employed as DoD civilians may lose their civilian pensions if the sequestration continues. What we will attempt to do to prevent this from happening. So military retirees employed as DoD civilians will lose their civilian pensions. I don't know, that would be a Department of Defense question. I mean, I honestly don't know. And you're talking about the inability to collect 2 pensions or collect military pension while you work for the yeah, I understand. Yeah, I think there was some discussion about it, but I'd be surprised if it got anywhere. But that's going to be a defense. I mean, internally in the Defense Department, they're going to have to first kind of say this is what we want to do, and then the chance will be for Congress to interact with them on it. But I'm glad you brought it to my attention because I did hear that there was this issue of the military retirees. As you know, I support unionizing state legislation. Look, we have to attract military retirees any way, shape we can. In Maryland, I was always frustrated that we didn't do everything we needed to do here, such as provide the military retiree pension an exemption from taxation like our surrounding states do. This is crazy. I mean, military retirees don't cost us because most of them don't have kids in school. They're not taking up jail space. They're not costing us. So I didn't understand. I never understood why we wouldn't do what the surrounding states do. Anyway, listen, it's almost 7 o'clock. Thank you all very much. Those of you who have questions, come on up. I'll be more than happy to answer them in person.
What about the Patriot Act?
What about the Patriot Act? Oh, yeah. Oh, let me address it.
2 years ago, a delegation from Campaign for Liberty sat in your office.
Yes.
We presented you with a 10-page paper on abuses of the Patriot Act that's outlined by the Inspector General's Department. At that time, you told us before the next renewal of the Patriot Act happened, there would be open hearings in the Congress. You promised us that.
Yeah.
You did not produce. Now we know that we only know the tip of the iceberg. When is this government going to come clean and tell us what this secret law says, how it's being secretly interpreted, how it's being secretly implemented, and what it means to every person in this room.
Let me, look, I'm glad you brought it up. I'm sorry we didn't get a question on it until now. I am very, very worried about what the NSA is doing. And I will tell you, see, people use justification to say, well, you know, we catch terrorists with these techniques. And the only analogy I draw is, if the police were out there right now going door to door in every house, we would find crime, right? We'd find drugs in some people's homes, and we'd find something going on. So we could actually find criminals with illegal searches. But we actually fought a Revolutionary War about the general warrants. That's what's called a general warrant. You can go into anybody's house at any time and look for crime. So I'm very worried about it, and that's why I voted for the Amash Amendment. It was very close. We didn't get it. But I feel strongly that if they're going to take my phone records, or what we found out even more recently, now they're admitting to violating the law, which is stunning to me. Okay, because again, you know, and I think I told you when you were in the office, part of the problem is we kind of trust them to obey the law. And what we're finding out is that they probably weren't. So they're looking at emails, they're doing phone records, you know. That's why I support the Amash Amendment.
And Senator Wyden is saying that he sits on the Intelligence Committee, and he's been telling us that he's not allowed to reveal to us what's really going on. And he's saying when the American people find out what's really going on, we're going to be stunned that we only know what the tip of the iceberg at this point.
About this, I agree. I think we're going to find out even worse, and we're going to find out that the NSA was not complying with the law in the end. That's very worrisome because, again, as I think I told you when you came to the office, when we pass the Patriot Act, we have to assume that the government's going to comply, because if they're not going to comply, it doesn't make a difference whether you have it or not. Well, it appears they're not complying. Because I will tell you, I don't know about you, but I'm offended by the government knowing the record of every person, of having access to every person I call. Not that I'm calling criminals, I just don't think it's their business to do it. So I differ. I think the majority of Republicans actually didn't vote for the amendment. I voted for the amendment. I think, and again, look, my parents came from communist countries. I fully get what happens when the government gets out of control. This is worrisome. And the justification, look, I don't want terrorism, I don't want terrorist acts to occur. But you can't use the justification, in my mind, you can't use the justification that we detect crime with these techniques. Because then let's just reinstitute the general warrant. Let's just have the government knock on anybody's door and do a random search for criminal activity.
They do it for SOD.
Yes. Okay, anyway, no, thank you very much.
What about the lead medals to fund Obamacare letter? We support it.
The what?
The lead medals to fund Obamacare letter. We support it.
The Lee letter. Lee is the one who wants he wants to have it tied to the continuing resolution. I think we want it on the debt ceiling. And if you think it through, the debt ceiling, and I can talk to you personally, I think the debt ceiling makes more sense. Yeah, we're gonna pass a defunding bill.
Will you have another town hall meeting in this area, because so many people could not get in tonight?
Yeah, we will. You know, these are the best attended town hall meetings I have anywhere in the district. God bless you all.